Hi there. It's September the 20th, and today in our journey through the book of Isaiah, we're looking at the balance of chapter 33, and we're going through to chapter 36. So chapter 33, in verse 10, the Lord says, "Now I'm going to arise." He's saying, "Now listen to me. I'm going to be exalted." And he basically says all those who are living in sin, all those who are living distant from him, are going to be judged. There's going to be a reckoning coming. But in chapter 34, when we go on to there, we see that this is continued in the picture of the judgment of the nations depicted by Edom. And Edom is one of the ancient enemies, one of the ancient aggressors against Israel and against Judah. Remember that Edom is another word for Esau, the brother of Jacob. And so Esau has always been the picture of the one who kind of fights against Israel. But God is saying that the nations symbolized by Edom will no longer be able to do that God is going to bring judgment to them, that there is going to be a reckoning coming to them. But then there is also going to be the raising up of a king. This theme of the Messianic King, and this comes up particularly in chapter 35. Chapter 35 has some of the most encouraging words in Isaiah. It says, "The eyes of the blind will be opened, the ears of the deaf unstopped, the lame man will leap like a hart." Those famous words that Handel took in his Messiah and put it into music. And then at the end of chapter 35, there's that promise that there will be a return, that the exiles will come back. There will be a new phase of life for Israel, and the ransomed of the Lord will return, and they'll come with singing to Zion, and everlasting joy will be upon their heads. And this is kind of the paean of praise which ends the first part, the first section of Isaiah. And then we move on in chapter 36 to the historical narrative. From chapters 36 through to chapter 39, it's the historical narrative of what was going on, of some of the fulfillment of what Isaiah was talking about. And so in chapter 36, King Sennacherib sends his great representative, the Rabshakeh he's called. The Rabshakeh simply means the big cup bearer or the big officer, and he comes and he stands before the gates of Jerusalem, and he calls out and he says, "Why are you trusting Hezekiah, who is the king at this time? Why are you trusting Hezekiah? He won't be able to deliver you. None of the kings or of the gods have been able to deliver them." And in fact, Hezekiah has removed some of the high places where people have been worshipping God. Now, that's a misunderstanding, because the high places were actually often used instead of being used instead of the temple being used. And so Hezekiah has removed the high places so that people will worship in the place where God calls them to worship. And so the Rabshakeh is saying to the people, and he also says it in Hebrew. He doesn't just say it in Aramaic, which is the international language, but he's really saying it in Hebrew so that everyone gets scared and gets worried. He says, Hezekiah won't be able to deliver you, Egypt won't be able to rescue you, and your God won't be able to rescue you, because the God of Samaria, the God of these other nations, wasn't able to rescue them. So how do you think that God is going to rescue you? The people who listen actually say nothing. At the end of chapter 36, it says they don't get into an argument. They hold their silence because Hezekiah has commanded them not to get into argument, not to get into battle with the Rabshakeh. And so we're moving into a place where God is going to have to turn up. But actually they cry out to God right at the end of chapter 36. Shebna and Eliakim, the king's officials, come to the king, and their clothes are torn. They're in a place of great need. We see here that God is moving through history, and this is a powerful time in history. It's a time when history is being shaken, particularly through the great power of Assyria. But we're also told that God will have his way. This Messianic King will be established, and that Zion will be the praise of the earth, and that the redeemed of the Lord will come with singing to Zion. Joy and celebration will be their hats, will be their headwear, will be their headgear, like their party hats. We, of course, know the story and its outcome, that Jesus is the one who brings that great restoration. He brings the final part of the story as the Messianic King, who is now seated upon not a physical place, but actually upon the heads of his people of all nations, and we are celebrating that joy today with him. Have a very good September 20th.